So we start as we always do at the United Nations by a minute of silent prayer or meditation. Thank you, distinguished delegates. Now we start with the inaugural session, and I'd like to invite Dr. Vaishnavi Shankar, the director of Shankar IAS Academy, to say a word of welcome. Dr. Vaishnavi Shankar.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, distinguished delegates. Respected Ambassador Shri T.S. Tirumurti, sir. Respected former Ambassador Shri T.P. Sreenivasan, sir. Organizers from Labour India and members of Shankar IAS Academy. Beloved student delegate participants, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to the 6th edition of UN Replica, which is organized by Labour India in collaboration with Shankar IAS Academy. First, I would like to extend a special welcome to our prestigious guest, Shri T.S. Tirumurti, sir, who is an Indian Foreign Service officer belonging to 1985 batch. He is currently serving as a permanent representative of India to the United Nations at New York. Shri T.S. Tirumurti, sir, prior to taking over his current assignment in May 2020, he was the secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs from February 2018 to May 2020. At this time, he handled the economic relations portfolio, and his focus area was India's development partnership, Gulf and the Arab world and Africa. Earlier to this, he also served at the Indian Embassy in Cairo and at the Permanent Mission of India in Geneva, Switzerland. He was also the first Indian representative to the Palestinian Authority in Gaza. He also served as a counselor at the Indian Embassy in Washington, D.C., then served as the Deputy Chief of Mission at the Indian Embassy in Jakarta, and held the position of India's High Commissioner in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. He is also proudly the author of 3 books, Kissing the Heavens, Kailash Manasarovar Yatra, Clive Avenue, and Chennai Vasi. Labour India and Shankar IAS Academy is very happy to have your presence in this UN Replica program, sir. Now, I would like to extend my warm greetings and welcome to Shri T.P. Sreenivasan, sir. Sreenivasan, sir, is a former ambassador of India and former permanent representative of India to the United Nations. He has served as the governor for India at the International Atomic Energy Agency. He served as the deputy chief of mission of the Embassy of India in Washington. The Union Ministry of External Affairs hailed his tenure as a highly successful one, during which there was remarkable improvement in Indo-US relations. He is also a former member of National Security Advisory of India. Sir is an expert columnist at renowned newspapers and journals. Some of his important works include Encounters, Words, Adventures in Diplomacy, Applied Diplomacy through the Prism of Mythology. One of the important pillars of this UN Replica program is T.P. Sreenivasan, sir. It is an honor to welcome you, sir, for this 6th edition. I'm delighted to welcome all the distinguished student participants. I'm very happy with the fact that you have prioritized the spirit of responsible global leadership by participating in this program. This UN Replica is significant as one of its main objectives is to create awareness among student community about the structure, working, and strategies of the United Nations. By knowing this, the students would work to end poverty, promote sustainable development, and humanitarian action. They will also promote social progress and stop the worst effects of climate change. The UN Replica provides a wonderful platform for the delegate participants to study, discuss, debate, and resolve the challenges through the framework of United Nations. The themes are very carefully set to meet the current global priorities, which are climate change and the situation in Afghanistan. I would like to conclude by again thanking T.S. Tirumurti, sir, T.P. Sreenivasan, sir, program coordinators at Labour India, and members of Shankar IAS Academy, and the participants for whom the entire program is designed. I wish you all a successful UN Replica 2022. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished director of the Shankar IAS Academy, Dr. Vaishnavi Shankar. Speaking as the chair of this session, may I say a few words? Ambassador T.S. Tirumurti, Permanent Representative of India to the United Nations, Dr. Vaishnavi Shankar, Director of Shankar IAS Academy, Mr. Rajesh Kulangara of Labour India, distinguished delegates, honored guests, and friends. I'm grateful to Dr. Vaishnavi and her colleagues for inviting me to mentor an edition of UN Replica for them. The Academy has created a whole cadre of civil servants in India, and the UN Replica will be another educational tool for its candidates to prepare for the ensuing competitive examinations. I am passionate about this program because I am able to share my experience of the United Nations with the younger generation. We present the UN most authentic form to give the participants a sense of the substance and form of the global organization. The participants will have a real feeling of deja vu, as though you had seen this before, if you ever visit the United Nations as visitors or delegates. The UN Replica will give the participants an opportunity not only to sharpen their skills, but also to learn the art of winning friends and influencing people and building consensus on global issues. It seeks to rid the world of the scourge of war and to turn swords into plowshares to build peace and prosperity. The future generations have a major stake in the United Nations, and the more you know about its functioning, the better will you be able to reform it for the good of humanity. The two issues that we will be discussing here, climate change and Afghanistan, have to be resolved to avoid the destruction of the globe by environmental degradation or by terrorists. I'm sure that you'll be able to contribute to the solution of these problems through your deliberations. We are extremely fortunate to have Ambassador Tirumurti, a gift from Tamil Nadu to India and the world, to inaugurate the UN Replica. He is with us today after a splendid performance as a member of the Security Council for 1 year and as its president for the month of August 2021. I hope he will himself share with you the Indian accomplishments in the UN since he assumed position of the permanent representative of India to the United Nations. I welcome him heartily and request him to inaugurate the Shankar IAS Academy UN Replica 2022. Thank you very much.
Ambassador T P Sreenivasan, Chief Mentor, Office Bearers of Shankar IAS Academy, distinguished dignitaries, young delegates of UN Replica 2022, and my dear friends. It is indeed a great pleasure to participate in UN Replica 2022. I commend Shankar IAS Academy for organizing this online event. Shankar IAS Academy has trained thousands in successfully qualifying for the prestigious civil services, and I am confident that this maiden venture will benefit several more who are yearning for an insight into how the UN functions. I am particularly delighted to see that UN Replica go from strength to strength since its first edition in 2016. The UN Replica is the closest you can get to an authentic experience on tackling pressing international challenges in a multilateral context, in this case, the UN context. I would like to particularly thank Ambassador T P Sreenivasan, the Chief Mentor, for not only mentoring you, but also mentoring me over the years as my senior in the Indian Foreign Service. As I have mentioned before, I would like to recall that when I was Under Secretary for Bhutan in the Ministry of External Affairs in New Delhi, I was posted as Second Secretary to the Permanent Mission of India to the UN in Geneva. At the time, Ambassador Sreenivasan was Joint Secretary and head of the United Nations Division. When I called on him and sought his advice on what I should expect in the UN, he gave me a piece of advice which has stood me in good stead right through my career. He said, as Under Secretary Bhutan at headquarters, I was dealing with important India-Bhutan bilateral issues, ranging from the building of dams, airports, big projects, furthering political and trade relations, etc., in a very substantive way. However, when I go to Geneva, he said, I will accost a world where they spend considerable time disputing full stops and commas, where a particular word should be used and where it should be deleted, etc. He said, I will be initially quite frustrated entering the world of UN negotiations. However, he added that at the end of my 3-year tenure, I will be so engrossed and taken up by these things that I may end up thinking that nothing really matters except the United Nations. He therefore advised me that as long as I don't swing from one extreme of bilateral relations to the other extreme of multilateral relations and manage to stay somewhere in between, I will do well in the foreign service. Why I mention this specifically is that dealing with multilateral or UN diplomacy can be frustrating, especially to get 193 countries on board. But it can also be very intoxicating since you're dealing with all countries of the world and it feels as if you're shaping the world. The truth is always somewhere in between. And this is a perspective all of you young delegates need to keep in mind, which is that the United Nations has its own place and a very important place in the world of today. But it is not the only thing which shapes diplomacy. Friends, since your academy is in Chennai, it is worth mentioning that Tamil Nadu has had association with the United Nations since the birth of the United Nations and its charter. The Charter of the United Nations was signed in 1945 in San Francisco, the United States. What is interesting is that India signed this charter in 1945 itself, 2 years before we even got independence, and became a founding member of the United Nations. And this charter was signed in 1945 by 2 Indians, both of whom came from this part of India, Shri Arcot Ramaswamy Mudaliar and Shri V.T. Krishnamachari. Both of them came from the soil of Tamil Nadu and went on to represent India at the global level. Sir Arcot Ramaswamy Mudaliar was also the first president of a very important body of the UN, namely the ECOSOC, the Economic and Social Council, thereby attesting to the prominent role India and Indians have played in the United Nations even before we became independent and continue to play till today. Another aspect which I would like you all to keep in mind is the interconnectedness between our domestic policy and foreign policy. Foreign policy, in many ways, is an extension of our domestic policy. It does not exist in a vacuum. As diplomats, we constantly try to make sure that both our foreign policy and domestic policy are in harmony and protect our national interests. And this is what we strive to do in the United Nations. India is currently in the Security Council for a 2-year period. We have just completed 1 year in 2021. This is the 8th time we are in the Security Council. Given the fact that we have an independent point of view and an independent foreign policy, we have been able to effectively play a constructive bridging role on many issues. Our presidency of the Council was in August, where we focused on some areas of priority for us, like maritime security, UN peacekeeping, terrorism, etc. Prime Minister chaired the session on maritime security, the first time an Indian Prime Minister was chairing a council meeting. We had an important presidential statement, a first of its kind, on the holistic concept of maritime security. On peacekeeping, India has been the largest contributor of more than 250,000 troops over the years. We drafted a council resolution on the protection of peacekeepers, which was adopted unanimously with all the 15 members of the council co-sponsoring it. Our External Affairs Minister chaired this session. We focused on technology and peacekeeping and also contributed $1.6 million to sponsor a technology platform called Unite Aware to protect peacekeepers. We have also gifted COVID vaccine doses for all the UN peacekeepers of the world. It is India's way of walking the talk on peacekeeping. It may interest you to know that the first ever women peacekeepers were Indian when our women police contingent went to Liberia under the UN flag. The third high-level event under our presidency was on terrorism, which I will come to shortly. As regards 2022, I believe that this will be a period of consolidation and reinforcement of our priorities in the Security Council. We have also taken over as the chair of the Counter-Terrorism Committee this year, in addition to continuing as chair of both the Taliban Sanctions Committee and the Libya Sanctions Committee. India will also be the president of the Security Council later in December this year. So we expect to finish off on a high note. Friends, the topic which you have been given to discuss in the UN replica, climate change and Afghanistan, are two of the most important topics which the world is grappling with, whether inside or outside the Council. On Afghanistan, it is important that the international community should remain united and speak in one voice. The collective expectations of the international community with respect to Afghanistan post-August 15th, 2021 were laid out in clear and explicit terms in the UNSC Resolution 2593 adopted during our presidency. The UN Security Council resolution lays down the requirements on the fight against terrorism, not to use Afghan soil for terror, as well as in terms of the expectations on inclusive negotiated political settlement with full, equal and meaningful participation of women and minorities and diverse political ethnic groups in the country. The importance of upholding human rights, including those of women, children and minorities, and the requirement to provide humanitarian assistance to the people of Afghanistan. We have also adopted a resolution in December 2021 in the Council, which provides for a humanitarian carve-out to the sanctions to ensure that the dire humanitarian situation in Afghanistan is addressed immediately and the Afghan people receive humanitarian assistance. India has sent urgently much needed medical supplies and vaccines and are also sending food assistance in keeping with our long-standing support on the humanitarian and the development front to the Afghan people. In this context, a robust presence of the UN in the country would be helpful in this very critical period. We will keep our focus centered on the Afghan people. As regards climate change, it is important for us to acknowledge that India has set itself ambitious targets for combating climate change. The Prime Minister himself announced even more ambitious targets in the Conference of Parties in Glasgow. He called it Panchamrit. We are also probably the only G20 country on path to achieve its 2030 pledge under Paris Agreement. It is equally important to understand that the decisions taken in the Conference of Parties remain the most authoritative decisions, since it is taken by all countries by consensus. Consequently, let us not undercut the Conference of Party decisions, including the decisions taken in COP26 in Glasgow. That is why we firmly opposed the attempt by some countries to bring the issue of climate change into the Security Council, an attempt to override the consensus-based approach of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. We saw this attempt as an attempt to have the Security Council take over the climate change agenda and then take decisions without the involvement of most developing countries. It sought to hand over the responsibility to a body which neither works through consensus nor is reflective of the interests of the developing countries. The developed countries have also fallen far short of their commitments, including mitigation. And we have continued to emphasize on adaptation and climate finance, which is crucial for developing countries. The developed countries pledged $100 billion per year by 2020. It's already 2022 and they are nowhere near realizing this pledge. We will continue to underline the importance of all the pillars of climate change, especially adaptation, adequate financing, access to technology, capacity building, etc. India will lead by example. one of the important steps we took in the United Nations, along with numerous other developing countries, is to get observer status for the International Solar Alliance, which is an international body and a brainchild of our own Prime Minister. As you know, counter-terrorism is one of our key priorities in the Security Council. Our chairmanship of the Counter-Terrorism Committee is particularly significant because it comes in the 75th year of our independence. The UN has recognized terrorism as one of the biggest challenges facing humanity. We have been consistently highlighting this issue in the Security Council. We have emphasized many of its dimensions as well. For example, the importance of remaining united against terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. Not provide any excuse for terrorist acts or justify terrorism. Not make any artificial distinctions or labels between terrorist acts, etc. Further, terrorist forces have only grown in sophistication and have learned to use innovative financing as well as innovative technologies, including artificial intelligence, robotic, drones, etc., and launched terror attacks, including on neighboring countries. Consequently, member states should strengthen the implementation of what is called the Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy, which in fact India had actively contributed to shaping it. So as chair of the Counter-Terrorism Committee, we will work with other members of the committee to see how best to advance our common agenda on this very important issue. On issues affecting the developing world, India has been a strong voice to protect their interests. African and Middle East issues tend to dominate the agenda of the Council. Given our historical and very close relations with Africa, we have spoken out for African countries against unrealistic benchmarks on their sanctions regime, for greater assistance to Africa to fight terrorism, and support African solutions to African problems. We have equally leveraged our strong and historical links to countries in the Middle East to support a more balanced handling of their issues in the Security Council. Friends, as we end half our tenure in the world's principal organ, tasked with the maintenance of international peace and security, I can state with confidence that we have been making a difference in the way the United Nations and its member states see the world. I thank UN Replica and Shankar IAS Academy once again for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts. Thank you.
So I thank the distinguished permanent representative of India to the United Nations, Mr. Tirumurti, for his inaugural address. To Mr. Rajesh Kulangara, a partner in this UN Replica, to give a vote of thanks. Mr. Rajesh Kulangara.
Thank you, sir. Good morning. President of UN Replica 2020, Ambassador P Sreenivasan, sir. Distinguished Chief Guest Ambassador T.S. Tirumurti, sir. The Director of Shankar IAS Academy, Dr. Vaishnavi Shankar. Distinguished delegates and all the members of the organizing team. UN Replica started as a small journey in 2016. We are happy that we could travel across India from Kerala to Punjab and now from Trivandrum to Chennai in a short span of 6 years. I believe that this is just the beginning, the first step in a journey of 100 years, a journey towards a more peaceful and tolerant future for our children. Looking forward, I believe that the collaboration that we have with the leading IAS coaching academy, pioneer in civil service guidance, it will be fruitful for us to collaborate again. And I'm happy that we got this opportunity to associate with Shankar IAS Academy. Let me take this opportunity to thank the brain behind, the mentor of UN Replica, the man behind the show, and our dear leader, respected Ambassador TP Sreenivasan sir. Take this opportunity to thank our distinguished chief guest of the day, Ambassador T.S. Tirumurti, who's been a proud Indian on this occasion of 75 years of Indian independence, because he could chair the Security Council, was the president of the Security Council, as well as the chair of the Counter-Terrorism Committee. And it's a proud moment for us because we discussed the situation in Afghanistan, and he was our chief guest because he's been chairing the Taliban Sanctions Committee as well. So you know how blessed we are for his presence. We thank our mentor, Ambassador T.S. Tirumurti sir. Now it's my turn to thank our friend and our well-wisher, the one behind this show, who strongly stood behind us, Shankar IAS Academy and Dr. Vaishnavi Shankar. Thank you, ma'am, for your spirit and the trust you have put forward in UN Replica. I take this opportunity to mention our mentor, Domil, who's been a distinguished delegate of UN Replica for past couple of years. I thank all the distinguished delegates of UN Replica 2022 for your spirited participation. Looking forward to a wonderful session and hope all of you will see the heights of diplomatic career in the coming years. Wishing you all the very best. Thank you all. Thank you, Shankar Academy. All the very best to all the delegates. And last but not the least, let me thank all the members of the organizing committee, especially the technical support team, both at UN Replica and Shankar Academy, especially Mr. Sajeev and all the members of the technical committee and organizing committee. Thank you all once again. Thank you.
I thank Mr. Rajesh Kulangara for his vote of thanks. Distinguished delegates, I think we have come to the conclusion of the inaugural ceremony. So we'll adjourn for a minute, but please continue and start the practice session. I thank you all once again for participating in the inaugural session and apologize for all the inconvenience caused. We will make up for it in the actual session. Thank you very much.